All right, welcome everybody. Hello. Hopefully this is working and we're broadcasting. Welcome to the Career Futures event in 2021. My name is Trygve Fasti. I'm the department head of product design. And before we get started with today's panel discussion, I have a few brief announcements. The first one is that this session is being recorded. So later on in the question and answer session, if students want to ask questions, we'll invite them in and they can ask their question to the panelists, but be aware that things will be recorded. So if you don't want your face to be documented in the cloud for however long this Zoom recording lasts, you can have the option of turning off your screen, but obviously we'd love to see you and have you participate as well. Also, I just wanted to mention that at the end of the session, there will be a drop-in session later this afternoon from 3:30 to 4:30 with alumni Liz Zaro. And she still has some time in her schedule to speak with people. So if you scheduled an interview, not interview, but a portfolio review, Liz still has time in her schedule. So I know a lot of them are filling up, but there's still an opportunity for you to meet with her, and I highly recommend that you do. Also, I'd like to take a brief moment to recognize that the land and places that the University of Oregon uses to live and work is the occupied territory of the Kalapuya Ilihi people, and that we acknowledge and respect the Kalapuya people and the Confederate tribes of the Grand Ronde as past, present, and future stewards of this land. All right, so without further ado, we have three panelists here today that I'm really happy to welcome. They are all alumni of the product design program. We have Becky Chierichetti, hopefully I'm saying that right, Sean Kelly, and Katie Lee. And I'll let each of them introduce themselves briefly. Maybe each of you can tell us when you attended the U of O and where you're currently working and what role you're is at your current position. And, why don't we start with Becky, and then we'll do Sean and Katie.
Hi, my name is Becky Carachetti. I'm a user experience researcher and designer working in Intel Labs, and I graduated from University of Oregon with a BFA in product design in 2016.
Hi, my name is Sean Kelly. I graduated from the U of O with a BFA in product design in 2011, and I currently work at GroveMade as the sort of designer slash lead designer. We have a pretty interesting little team there. And yeah, really happy to be here talking with you guys.
Hey everyone, I'm Katie Lee. I went to U of O and graduated also with a BFA back in 2014 is when I graduated. I currently work for a design consultancy. It's a pretty small design consultancy in town, or in Portland, I guess, called Evolve Collaborative, and I am a senior design researcher there.
Thanks, folks, for being here. It's really great to see you again. I think one of the exciting things about our program and just kind of like being here over time is like watching all the students come through and go out into the world, and how our alumni are really successful and going off and doing cool stuff. And I think it's great for everyone here who's in the web session today to kind of experience what the sort of diversity of what folks wind up doing, because design is a really diverse practice. And maybe along those lines, I thought it would be interesting for each of you to kind of describe kind of what your daily life is like. I mean, I know like projects change day to day and there's lots of different hats that designers wear, but it'd be just interesting to hear like the kinds of things that you do on a kind of routine basis in your work. And so maybe each of you can take a little bit of time and just kind of outline what a day or a week in your life kind of seems like. I think that would be really valuable for people to hear. Maybe we'll go in the same order.
So a lot of my day is meetings. We work in a pretty big interdisciplinary team, and so there's a lot of just sort of syncing up on projects and stuff like that. So often I'll be sometimes the only design person. Maybe I'll have one other designer in the room, but just kind of keeping tabs on where projects are moving with engineers and that sort of thing. And when we're not doing project updates, spend pretty much all of my time doing things like storyboarding, maybe different sorts of prototyping, which I can get into a little bit later, but basically preparing things because we do a lot of user research. So we have to take these technologies the engineers are building and manifest it in some way, often sort of faking it a little bit because the things we're developing technically don't exist yet. And then we take it out and see what people think of it. So when we're in sort of a research phase or a prototype testing phase, there's a lot of things like interviewing. Often we'll have to like find a space or co-op a lab in the office and rig it up to get our technology working. And sometimes we'll bring people in, sometimes we'll go to people, but there's a lot of interviewing and talking to people and then sort of collecting all the data that we get out of that testing and trying to understand it and analyzing it and then taking that and putting it into reports and sort of giving it back to the technical people.
And those reports that you guys are putting together, like I imagine that's kind of a large part of kind of like implementing in a way, like the findings that you learned. And how does that, like, in terms of like your role as a designer, you know, you're kind of like setting up these tests and kind of like conceptualizing that. And then you're also kind of processing it and then re-presenting it, or, you know, like re-presenting it back to your team. And I'm just curious, like, yeah, like what do you find yourself, like, what's valuable process in, or, you know, kind of like in your working method as sort of a designer?
So basically, I still have this textbook. This is actually a class that you taught, and I'm sure somebody's still doing this, but this is my job. If it's backwards for everyone, it says research methods for product design. But in terms of the processes we use, we're in the labs part of the company. So the things that we're developing are 3 to 5 years out for market at most, and they're generally really pushing the boundaries of what technology might be able to do. So it's definitely not things like, there's kind of an association that user experience is user interface. So which button would you like to click in which order, and what's the, you know, least mouse travel you have to, stuff like that. And we don't do anything like that at all. And so it's hard to pick a process because what we do covers such a wide scope. I can't talk about it a whole lot because Intel is conscientious about intellectual property. But for example, one of the projects I've been on for a couple of years now is an augmented reality smart space meant to enhance educational experiences for children. So that has involved, well, it's a smart space. So I've had to design and 3D print custom hardware to hold all sorts of different cameras, try to take a lab space in our building, which are not really a child-friendly environment, and try to make them warm and inviting so that when we bring kids in here and then turn all the lights off because it's projection, that it's not scary. There's been, like, gosh, we had to design gameplay for these things and take them to teachers, and then we had to take them to like kids in their homes, and then we had to talk to parents about them. So that's not really a great answer, but I guess adaptability is the key here.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting because you're switching between like physically making things,
Yeah.
Compiling data for corporate use, you know, presenting concepts, like making spaces, you know, like user-friendly, interviewing people. I mean, there's like a lot of different kinds of activities, all wrapped up into like one kind of complicated and probably infinitely variable kind of process. Yes. Cool. All right, Sean.
All right. Well, I know probably all of our days look a lot different than they would have a year ago. Definitely. Like you can see it, I think we're all at home. Yeah, most of us are in the studio. So yeah, my day typically starts out, GroveMate is a very small company with very small teams. So every morning, and it's one of my favorite times of the day, I meet with the design team. So it's just 3 people. All of our teams are made up of something we call tripods. So there's 3 individuals, and every team has overlap by 2 individuals. So I'm on the design team, and I'm also on the marketing team, or part of the marketing team. So, and like user research and customer research. So my day typically starts with that. And we're kind of laying out, you know, what's going on with the products that we're working on, generally working on like 3 to 5 different products at a time. And not only products, but also like problems to do with the business, because we're direct to consumer. So there's a lot of things that, you know, we have to take care of throughout the day that's for the business specifically. So design doesn't just encompass creating products. It also encompasses how do we design this business to function well and to succeed. But after those meetings, generally I'm in Rhino a lot and sketching a lot, communicating with customers through things like surveys, and also like gathering photos and evidence for like certain users and how they interact with like their desks specifically, because we're a company that makes home office accessories, which is, we didn't realize we were so well positioned until COVID hit, and then things just kind of blew up in terms of people working from home. So that was, you know, kind of an interesting experience to try and figure out like, how do we sustain this business when demand and need is so high for this kind of product. Yeah, typically sketching, Rhino, communicating with the team. My friend Ken, who also is the co-founder of GroveMade, he and I always are like, we call it text battling. So we're sending each other sketches, renderings, like pretty much all day, back and forth, like articles, other things. So it's very collaborative. We're almost in constant communication and constantly inspiring one another. And then, you know, laughing about, you know, ideas that we've had, like little mistakes we make, and then learn from those mistakes and keep growing the company in different ways. So it's very fun. Lots of hats, like people were saying, there's lots of hats to be worn. So yeah, that's a typical day.
Seems like also, you know, very similar in terms of like the many hats that you wear, to what Becky was describing, but also like having a company that basically designs and builds and sells all the stuff like in a much more kind of like focused, like lot smaller company than Intel, right? So like you're kind of like, everything seems probably very immediate in a way, like tangible.
Yeah.
Probably go from your development to product release in a lot shorter than 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes products can be launched or designed and launched within a week or 2, depending on the need. Like if, for instance, like GroveMade was started as a company built around Apple products, so iPhone cases, things like that. So we have this like design and engineering turnaround that's super quick because we control every aspect and every layer of the business. And so like, for instance, when Apple launched their new iPhones recently, we don't make cases anymore, but we do make desk accessories. So stands and chargers and docks and things like that are within that realm. And so we actually were able to turn around a charger for their MagSafe within a week. And I like what Becky said about like faking it, or like having like something that's like not real, but almost real. We create these things called phototypes. So oftentimes what you'll see on the website is a prototype that's like really well made, but it's not real at all. It's all like mostly handmade or made really quickly in our shop. So that's really fun. But I also view Grove as almost like, over the years, like we've kind of built a recipe for the products. So we use the same materials, same kind of design aesthetic over and over and over again. So one of my favorite shows is Chef's Table. I bet everybody probably has seen it or enjoys it maybe. But yeah, I almost view Grove as kind of like a restaurant in that way. Like we're using specific ingredients and we're creating products that fit within that mold.
Cool. All right. Thank you. Katie?
Yeah, so I think what's interesting is, so I work at a consultancy, which is basically companies, we'll work for companies such as GroveMade on the very small end, and we'll also work for companies such as Intel on the very large end. And I get to work across a lot of different industries, which keeps my job exciting. And that's actually what attracted me to working at a consultancy in the first place, because I'm working on, yeah, like technology, finance, sportswear, small like startups, consumer electronics. So it really ranges depending on the projects that's coming in. My role as a design researcher is similar to what Becky does, actually, where I'm working on that kind of front end part of the design process, really going out and designing research programs for our clients, designing like the tools and activities, or even like the prototypes or stimuli that we might show to consumers to kind of get their feedback. And then going out and talking to them. And that, like, it's very different now because a lot of them are over Zoom. So I'm doing a lot of Zoom interviews with people. But beforehand, one of the great things about my job was that I did get to travel a lot, which was cool. So I was able to travel internationally and domestically. The other thing is, like, similar to what everyone's saying about wearing a bunch of different hats, is like, we are a 12-person design studio. So we do wear a ton of different hats. And even though my like title is senior design researcher, I also am on product design programs, and that's obviously my background because I went to school for product design. So I get to work on those as well. I work on service design programs. I work on kind of just like wherever we need to, because we never know what will come in. You know, like at some points we will have a ton of research programs, so a lot of people will be working on research, but at the other times maybe we have a bunch of product design programs come in. And the other thing that we often do is we like do a lot of client workshops, so creative workshops, to kind of help our clients almost like use the design process within their own work. So these might be people who are in the business side of things and they're not creatives, and we kind of help them unlock that creative side to kind of come up with new ideas, or think about like a vision for their company, maybe like 5 or 10 years down the road. So that's a lot of what I do. I'm trying to think if I'm missing anything. Oh, more like day to day, it's a lot of, I'm on the computer a lot. I mean, I think that was something interesting going to U of O, because I was very like hands-on at U of O, a lot of like wood shop time, right? And like in reality, my job is like on the computer. A lot of creating like pretty decks and Keynote. Keynote is like the #1 tool that I personally use, more so than any of the Adobe products.
And do you find when you're working on, I mean, I think that consultancy is interesting because you are kind of constantly like jumping into different areas of all sorts of things. You know, it could be a kitchen product or some business strategy, or, you know, like a medical device, or, you know, it could be anything really.
Yeah.
How do you like, do you typically formulate like a team for a client project, and then are you working with other people with other strengths within those teams?
So I will say we all kind of, yeah, it does get mixed up, but I will say a lot of times like we do have a lot of repeat clients. And so typically the people who have worked on that client work before will stay with that client. So it does kind of make it so that we are a little bit specializing in like a couple different types of clients. Like, for example, I do a lot of consumer sportswear, and like finance is typically what I've been working on a lot, because those are just the clients that I've been working on. But we do make up kind of our teams of like, essentially usually like a team of three people is normal, 3 to 4 sometimes. There's usually like a lead and then maybe like 1 or 2 designers. And then another thing that we always try to do is we partner with our clients on a very like close level. So we definitely believe in like having a close relationship with our clients. So we're constantly like collaborating with them. I mean, our name is Evolve Collaborative, and we definitely live that, at least we try to. Yeah.
All right, thank you. So this next question is sort of hypothetical. Like if you could go back in time, well, from the movies I watched, going back in time is normally a problematic thing to do, but if it didn't end the world or whatever, if you could go back in time and talk to yourself when you were a student at the U of O. What do you think you would have, what advice would you have given, or what do you think you wish you had known about this field prior to graduation?
So I remember one of the things that I was kind of concerned about graduating was like wondering how the skill sets that I picked up in school were going to match the skill sets that might be required at whatever theoretical job I would end up getting, just because, like you were saying, design covers so many things. And I was like, how on earth can I actually enter this field and be prepared? And if I could go back in time, I'd sit myself down and be like, here, have a coffee. Don't worry, it's okay. Because I think the most critical thing to take away from school is sort of the underlying design thinking behind the skill sets. Like, for example, when I graduated, I was okay at Rhino. My CAD skills are like, and that's fine. The ability to just stay curious and investigate a bunch of new things, and also to teach yourself new skills as they come up, is way more valuable really than come out being like, yes, I'm great at Photoshop. It's the ability to move through the design thinking process to stay flexible, because at least in our line of work, things change all the time. Like, we'll be chugging along on a project and like, yes, great, super great progress, and then upper management will be like, well, actually, we want you to investigate this instead, and so you just got to completely change direction. So adaptability, staying curious and exploring lots of different things, those are the kind of skills that have really served me well coming out of University of Oregon into a professional context. Also time management, but that's probably true of any major.
All right.
I think, yeah, if I could go back in time and not destroy everything that we've built in humanity, I would probably tell myself and tell other people, like, don't be afraid to reach out for help. Like, if you're struggling with a project, or you don't know like where to take it, or you're feeling like almost like the competition of it is overwhelming. Like, there's so many people out in the world that want to connect with students, and this is your time to like meet people, make mistakes, like be messy with things, because once you get into the real world, like the stakes start to become a bit higher. So school is a great place just to start kind of like building a community, making connections, not only with fellow students and instructors and professors, but also people in the professional world. So, even in Eugene, like there's so many people down there that do this kind of work or have done this kind of work. And so just connecting and getting help when you need it, and not being afraid to ask for it, because generally, like, people want to help each other and people want to get involved and love that connection. So I would say that, like, not being so afraid to reach out to people when you need it.
I would definitely echo everything that's been said, but I think like when I was in school, I didn't even know that my job was a thing. Like, like there's just, like you said, design is so big. There's so many things that you would go into, especially nowadays where the product design and just like design world has just only expanded within, like, I don't remember how long it's been since I graduated, but like, there's just so many different fields that you can go into. And I didn't even realize that like this part of the design process, like the research part, was like a job that people have. And so I think things like this, like learning from people who are in the industry and like researching the different types of jobs that you can get and talking to those people and doing exactly what Sean's saying, like using your student card to kind of like cold call them and see if they'll have like an informational interview with you. Like, those are the types of things that I think are really helpful. Same thing with like internships, because that's just going to give you that experience and like you'll be able to test the waters and kind of see if that's the right fit for you. Because like I came out of school thinking I would do like, I was really interested in like soft goods. So I thought I would be like doing more of the like soft goods kind of like makery stuff, which is like an awesome career path. But then I also met these other guys who used to teach at U of O who kind of taught me what this realm of the world looked like. And I really liked it, and I liked the variety. So I don't know, it's also about connections, and those connections are going to definitely be the best thing for you. I think the other piece of advice that I always am mad at myself that I didn't take advantage of when I was a student is like, you have so many resources in front of you that are free, or not, they're not free because you're paying for them, but they are free to you because you are going to the school now and paying for that. So use them, like do your own personal projects on the side. I know it's hard to find the time, but like you actually have more time now than you will later. And yeah, use the workshops, like or the wood shops and things like that. So I wish that I took advantage of that more when I was in school. And also personal projects are great for portfolio pieces.
Yeah, I think also, just on that, a lot of the more advanced studios are pretty open-ended, even if there's a specific challenge that you're given. Take your own personal interests and that project, it's a school project, but it's also your project, and so like it doesn't mean it can't like become something that you're really invested in.
Mm-hmm. I think another thing too, building on that, is that like one thing that I didn't really think about until maybe some of my very last projects in school was that your school projects are your portfolio pieces. And so you have to think about them as your portfolio pieces, and like think about what it is that you want to showcase in your portfolio. And so almost like thinking about your projects in that kind of like thinking about what you want to showcase in your portfolio, and that should help inform what you do for your project. So if you have something in one area, but you want to showcase another strength, like show that. And also just remembering that like when you're doing your project to document really well for your, like just do everything for your portfolio essentially, because that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I don't think many employers look at your grades, but they always look at your portfolio. So.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just need to echo, document everything. Just get in the habit of snapping pictures. It doesn't matter if you think you won't need them. Document everything, and also continue to do that once you're professional.
Yeah, and I'd say too, like another thing along those lines is with those projects for your portfolio, like a lot of times I do work with students now too in the Portland area every now and then. And a lot of people like me too would kind of overdo it or like make things way too complex. And there's a healthy balance for your school projects, which will also make room for your personal projects. And I think echoing what Katie and Becky said, it's like work for your portfolio, of course, at this stage in your life. And also don't be afraid to put your personal projects in that portfolio as well, and put, bits of yourself in there, because, sometimes the school projects aren't necessarily like what you would want to do, but they're a good way to build your skills. And so just showing like how your passions kind of interject with those things and relate to those things, and where your strengths lie, I think is really important. And just have some fun along the way with personal stuff, and make time for yourself.
Also,
Go
sorry. It's also worth having maybe a collection of portfolio materials so that you can sort of customize your portfolio for different opportunities. The portfolio I took to my interview at Intel, I did the interview, and then I showed it to someone to get feedback after the fact, and their words were childish and disappointing. So I was like, well, there goes that opportunity. And then they hired me inexplicably. So definitely consider having enough stuff to cater your portfolio to whatever audience you're showing it to.
One thing I want to add too is I did an interview at this place once, and the portfolio was like okay, and like the person I was talking to kind of liked it, like they were kind of into it, but where the conversation went was like we had this same hobby outside of design and work, and we just talked about that for the last like 15 minutes of the interview, and it wasn't even an interview anymore at that point. It was just like chatting and laughing about this shared passion that we have. So I've seen it a lot of times where like people will connect more over that stuff than the design, and then that connection grows and builds that relationship, and then becomes like sort of this part of this glue that holds this team together.
My interview was a 40-minute conversation about a drawing assignment from one of Trigva's classes.
It's funny, you know, we do put a lot of like, you know, stake on like having this very professional portfolio, but I think those are really great points because a lot of times what people are looking for when they're hiring a new designer is somebody who's maybe got a slightly different take on things than what they're doing. They don't necessarily want to hire a cookie cutter example of someone who does exactly what they do. And I think, you know, like some of those oddball, you know, portfolio pieces can actually be great ways for building connections and actually having a more real conversation with people, which is, you know, what employers are looking for is somebody who's well-rounded and can talk about things and is interested in lots of different ideas. So that's definitely good to keep in mind. I think, you know, I had a lot of questions here and we're covering many of them and we're kind of like spilled out beyond the, you know, some of the initial questions. I think it might be interesting to hear maybe from, you know, kind of been more on the personal level, sort of conceptually, like zooming way back. What do you all feel like, based on your observations of working with other people, what qualities do you think make a good designer? And we've touched a little bit along this about being curious and things like that, but just in terms of your experience working with other people and like watching not just yourself but people around you being successful. Just curious what qualities you think make good designers.
So I'm in a bit of a unique situation in that there are 800 or 900 people working in Intel labs and 4 of us are designers and I'm one of them. So I don't actually get to work around a lot of design professionals. So often when there's too much design work, we will hire consultancies to help us. But one skill that actually we haven't touched on a lot, and I'm pretty sure this applies to many design positions, is being comfortable working with people who have completely different sets of expertise. So most of my coworkers are engineers with PhDs and they're extremely intelligent and I can't understand 80% of what they say, but I have to take that 20% and be able to work with it and, you know, communicate what their needs are and translate that into things that we can give to users. And then I have to take my expertise, which is understanding what people want out of technology and the relationships they want to have with these devices, and give that to the engineers in a way that makes sense for them. So just being able to understand completely different constraints. And if we were in a different part of the company, it's very rare that I would actually ever, you know, deal with end users of the stuff we're designing, because what happens is we develop kind of a concept, we sort of prove that like, yes, this has market viability, and then we give it to a business group inside Intel, and then they take it and actually manifest it, you know, 5 years in the future. So I imagine in other jobs, you would also, you know, be working with users a little bit more closely, maybe with marketing and with finance and stuff like that. But the ability to just drop into a very multidisciplinary team and have a clear understanding of your value and how you can deliver that value to other people. And again, being really adaptable and able to like think flexibly and be on your toes. And when an engineer is like, well, we can't do this little tiny detail that they think is unimportant, you're like, that's half the project. Like being able to respond to that kind of thing on the fly is critical.
I think I would say like the thing that I look for and the thing that I try to do myself is just have a sense of openness and being open to, you know, what the possibilities are and what other people are thinking, what other people want, what other people need. Just this constant curiosity and questioning of things, not only yourself, but the process and the products and the people, and doing it together. So like looking at each other and kind of understanding each other and where each other are coming from in terms of like on a team, and knowing how you can support each other and asking how you can support each other. So being open to like maybe something will take a bit longer for you, but it'll really help this other person down the road in the process, like get their work done faster. Or like maybe there's this connection that you didn't see across company where you can actually really collaborate in this really profound way. And without being open to that or to other people, you wouldn't necessarily get to that point. One of my favorite simple examples from Grove is like our graphic designer and photographer, Max, and he went to the U of O as well and studied graphic design. And over the years, we've collaborated a bunch, and he used to like hand draw a lot of the illustrations. And now we figured out that we can actually, when we build models of the products for design and engineering, we can render them in a technique called like a toon or a clown. So it's like fully colorful, like this tie-dye, like kind of crazy looking thing. And yeah, Max will just pull the surfaces and create his illustration like super quick with good shadows and all this stuff. And so we never would have known that if we weren't open to like trying these weird things where we're using renderings to create illustrations. And we never would have thought of that if we hadn't like just talked about it and been open about the ideas.
Yeah, I actually was going to say, well, one of the things I was going to say is similar to Sean, but it's kind of like designers are inherently good problem solvers. And I think like a lot of the designers that I know that are really good at what they do, like they're constantly having that problem solving brain on. And I think that takes a lot of like optimism and positivity too. Like the best designers have a positive outlook that like, we will figure this out. And there's always a way to figure this out. And I don't know, this is one of the things that I miss about being in studio, but like a lot of times during lunch, we'll sit together, eating our lunch, and like something will come up in conversation, and we'll just like get out our sticky notes and start brainstorming like how we could make something better and like coming up with ideas on that. And it's just like this, it's part of your kind of lifestyle. Like you just have that brain of like wanting to problem solve and figure it out. I think the other thing, especially because we have a lot of interns that come in. And so we constantly have at least one or two interns on our team. And so I'm working with a lot of young designers. And I think the ones that are the most successful are the ones that are just like really proactive, like they're just they're proactive with their work. Like I don't have to ask them to do something every single hour. Like they're kind of just doing it and then coming to me and like showing me what they did. And like I think the other thing is like curiosity is like really important. So asking a lot of questions, just being like proactive in wanting to know and wanting to be a part of what's going on. So yeah.
I wanted to add to what Katie said about like that lunch kind of like brainstorm session. That totally always happens. I think like when you take a breather from something, all of a sudden like your problem solving brain is still going, but you have like this different perspective because you're not in the same space, and big things happen in those moments. Like I think some of the best work that we've done at Grove has been like at night. Like I'll think of something and I'll text one of my friends at work, and then like all of a sudden we'll have our sketchbooks out and we'll be like on a Zoom call and like talking about something. So it's just like this constant problem solving is super fun.
Mm-hmm. And like, yeah, having fun with it too, right? Like I think designers know how to bring a little bit of fun into how we problem solve.
I think too, also noting when you get into these spaces where there are people who are not, in sort of a design mindset, that it is possible to help bring other people along and to encourage them not to be afraid of bad ideas, which in my department has been a consistent struggle and challenge. But that anybody with the right supports can be a design thinker, and that people who sometimes don't come from a design background can have really fabulous and fantastic ideas and contributions. So something I do at work pretty frequently actually is to set up design thinking workshops. So we'll have a problem, and then we'll take, well, in these times of COVID, something like Figma or Miro, and design a sort of workshop where we're like, okay, here's some information and here's activities. We're going to do this type of brainstorming, and there's like timers and rules. It can feel a lot less free flowing than if you're in a room with designers who just sort of can do these things intuitively and you just hit the ground running and go. But it is possible to sort of encourage that kind of thinking in other people. definitely the biggest hurdle is teaching people that it's okay to have bad ideas. I'm constantly saying bad ideas are good, but
yeah, we do workshops like that too. And I think that's like to my point about like having fun with it. We actually try to incorporate activities that are kind of like unlocking that more playful side of people. And we find that it works really well because we'll actually do like, on the surface, it may seem just kind of like a silly like game, but it really does unlock really good ideas, especially for people who are not traditionally like thinking creatively, because it kind of allows you to like remove that filter of like, oh wait, that's not a good idea, you know, like, or like, oh wait, I don't know if I can do that, or I don't know if I can draw, but yeah, it seems to work really well to kind of incorporate that sense of play.
at my office, it's a struggle just to get people to use sticky notes.
Yeah, and a bad idea is always like a gateway to a good idea.
Yes.
And sometimes it takes like 10 to 100 bad ideas to get to your one good idea. But there's little grains of a good idea in every idea. It's just working.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a rule at our office that's like yes and basically like never like unless it's, I don't know, a client, but like you should never say no. Like there is a way to build on ideas, and as designers, that's our job, to build on ideas and make them better. So
yeah, and bad ideas are more about being open to possibility than like taking a bad idea and running with it. So we don't maybe stick with the bad ideas, but when you're in a creative mode, sometimes you have to give people permission to be truly creative. And that might mean that if you've got 100 ideas on the wall, maybe like literally 5 of them have potential, but you might not have found those 5 if you didn't give people permission to like relax and be playful and be silly. Like in our last brainstorm, we got one of the engineers going and he had a concept where you make a giant soft robot that hugs children and picks them up and Velcros them to the wall. And this actually was relevant to the discussion. That's, maybe we don't Velcro children to the wall, but that's the kind of discussion that you should be unafraid to have.
We're just about into the question and answer time. And before we have folks who are attending raise their hands, I've got 2 questions here on the Q&A board. The first one is, if you've got a large set of skills, I'm not quite sure what type of skills this student is discussing, but let's say, you know, building, computer, rendering, those sorts of skills. On the resume, how do you, you know, convey that to people without seeming like you're making stuff up or bragging? Suggestions there.
It might make sense to see if you can kind of categorize some of those skills. Like if you have, you know, let's just say strong, like, I don't know, woodworking and metalworking, like you can put together beautiful objects. To, depending on where you're applying, you could say like strong prototyping skills. Maybe you've got strong, I don't know, digital prototyping skills to start with headings, and then maybe expand on the ones that are relevant, and also do the show, don't tell thing. So try and pick portfolio pieces that really illustrate some of those concepts, versus maybe necessarily needing to like list all of them out.
yeah, I was just gonna say that like your portfolio, what you show in your portfolio will show an employer way more than like a list on your resume. Like, I don't know that I've ever actually looked at a list on someone's resume. I look at their portfolio and I can tell if you have strong sketching skills if you show it, right? And I can tell how good your rendering skills when I see it. So yeah, just like showcasing it. It's not believable if you don't show us, right?
Next question, I'm just going to paraphrase here, but maybe suggestions in if students are interested in working with natural materials or like smaller tech startups, do you guys have any advice on getting involved in smaller companies from being a student?
I think from my experience, the way that I got involved was actually being there at the beginning of the companies. So, and that sometimes it's just like a serendipitous thing, like you just happen to be right place, right time. But internships can play a lot into this specifically. Like if you can find something small that's just starting out where you're just learning, and maybe it's being started by someone who has a lot of experience and they're just looking to build something new, getting involved with teams like that really helps. Or like doing it yourself, like just if you have an idea, like it's just keep pursuing it and like make it your side hustle. Of course you have to pay the bills, you know, and stuff like that. So finding like a job is important, but making the time and the space, and maybe even the job supports like that kind of thing. Like a lot of businesses want their designers to have outside interests and to have outside passions in the same realm, because it only makes their business stronger when their designers are excited and working towards something on their own. In terms of like the materials side of it, like tech and natural materials, I think like there's this convergence of the two right now. And it's been going on for a bit, but like tech is softening. Tech is becoming more approachable. And so there's a blend that's happening, and there's gonna be a lot more startups, I think, that do this kind of work, and the big companies are also doing it too. So yeah, if you have an idea, like pursue it, or find people. That's another piece, is like finding a team who shares your passion and shares your, like the thing you want to do, but also has complementary skills. So everyone can work together and create something, because you don't necessarily overlap on skills. You can build a team that way.
Another question, Robbie asks if you have any advice about after graduation, hopping, I don't know if hopping's the right approach, but transitioning from one job to the next, and if there's any advice you have about kind of like transitioning from one job to another after you graduate.
Well, so like I said, I like came out of school thinking I would do something completely different. So I worked for like a small like makery type place in Portland. And then, but it just I wasn't getting like the creative outlet that I needed. Like I wasn't designing as much as I thought I would be. So then I looked for other opportunities. I did an internship at Spec Products, which is like a case company down in the Bay Area, which was a really good opportunity. But then it taught me that like, I didn't really want to work in like tech and doing a bunch of like SolidWorks my whole life. So, yeah, and then I made it to Evolve. But I think like job hopping or internship hopping is a really great way to figure out what you want to do if you don't know, which I had no idea what I wanted to do. So, and internships are a great place to do that if you are able to, because there's not that pressure of like needing to deliver at a certain level. And also both parties know what it is. Both parties know that you're here to learn and that you're here to kind of essentially try it out in a way.
Yeah, and job hopping doesn't necessarily mean that you're going from one business to another. Like sometimes you're job hopping within the same business or the same industry. Like at Grove, like I've been there since the BFA. So I did internship and then job hop to production manager and then job hop to designer and then job hop to a bunch of other things. But like still, like it's like that wearing many hats thing. Like you don't necessarily have to be at a different place to job hop. You can still stay within the same place if you want to.
I also have been at Intel since before I graduated. Actually, I had my internship before I graduated, but same position, same team, same project, which is actually quite unusual for the amount of time I've been there. But I suppose one sort of unique giant corporation thing is you can definitely job hop within that corporation and not necessarily take new jobs and new roles, but I would run into people and just like make friends in the cafeteria, and there's a gym at my office. So there is a lot of connections happening there. And I've done work for people completely opposite end of the company just because we like struck up a friendship over the coffee machine or something. And so I wouldn't call that job hopping, but there's always ways that you can find more experience. And I think you always should be seeking new experience. I think it comes back to being curious, just always finding little ways to apply your unique skill set wherever you can. So you can do that by literally getting new internships or something, finding new roles in the job that you have, or just talking to people at the coffee machine.
We have another question here. Abhishek asks, the best way to approach someone asking for help or informational interviews?
I get just emails at least once a quarter from students like, hey, you know, someone mentioned you and I see you have this job and I'd love to talk to you about it. Like just like straight cold calling through email. I'm totally fine with that. It's never been awkward. I enjoy talking to students, so email.
Yeah, I've also gotten a lot over LinkedIn, which I think works well too. I think it's nice too when like students do a little bit of research and they say like, hey, like I see that you work for Evolve. I'm really interested in talking to you about like this specific part about what you do. So it's not just like, hey, can we talk? Like, I don't know. I think it's nice when students do a little bit of that kind of research. The other thing, what was I going to say? Oh yeah. So, you know, talking to students, I love talking to students, but it is sometimes when we're really busy, you know, it's not our first priority. So don't feel bad about sending me a message a couple times. Like, and I think that goes for a lot of people. It's not that we don't care about you. It's just that we may have seen it and forgot.
I agree on all fronts right there. Also, like, it's not really necessary to send like a resume, portfolio, and cover letter in a cold call email. Like, just like say, hey, what's up? And like Katie said, like, if you've done a little bit of research, like that's awesome. Like, you know, something about what we do. And since like you guys are coming from the U of O, like we know a lot about what you're doing and where you're coming from, and we can really relate. And I'm kind of a pushover. Like I almost say yes to every single person, but like Katie said, like sometimes it's easy to forget. So if 12 days go by, like hit me up again, because sometimes you just drop down to the bottom of my email list. Yeah, and if it weren't COVID, like it's always nice to meet in person. That's actually like one of the ways that we mainly like find people to hire is like meeting in person is really key. We've hired 2 U of O grads specifically because like they kind of pushed and came to the shop and visited, and then they left. Like we didn't have a job for them at the time, and then all of a sudden, like we remembered them 3 months later. We're like, oh, we should call this person, and then we called them, and they're like, we'll start tomorrow. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask to like come meet up sometime.
I guess, yeah, too. I did actually have an experience where a student asked for an informational interview and they were like, so do you have any job openings? And I said, no. And they're like, well, Intel's a big company. Surely you have job openings, have my portfolio. And I was just like, I can't help you. I'm sorry. And he pinged me a couple times after that. So, hey, what about job openings? And that was actually a little bit awkward because I have nothing to do with hiring. I couldn't help him. But so maybe don't do that. But
I think the professional etiquette is if you ask for an informational interview, you're not going to turn around and ask for a job. But it's an opening for building your connections. And as long as you don't have any like really aggressive like job hunting motivations, I think it can be certainly a great benefit. We are running out of time. There's one really last question here that I think will be pretty quick to answer. If it's based on a question about Evolve, it's maybe just the difference between a consultancy and freelance work.
Yeah, I mean, so I think the big difference is that freelance, you're typically working by yourself to work on client programs. Whereas I work with a team of people, and I also have the stability, like it's a stability piece, I think. Like I have the stability of like getting a salary and not really having to worry as much about the business development, like that's not part of my job. So projects come in for me and I work on them. Whereas like if you're freelance, you're having to do all of that. You're essentially running your own consultancy by yourself, which, you know, people do, and it's great.
I will say you can freelance as a side hustle too, which is something that I've experienced a little bit of. It's a little bit hard to manage sometimes with a full-time job, but it is doable.
It's funny because to me, consultancy feels like the equivalent of freelancing because our company is so huge.
Kind of
Yeah.
at a different scale.
I think the big one is that constant hustle. You know, if you're doing freelance, you're trying to be both the design team and the business development team all at once. And you know, it's hard to do good design work when you're constantly worrying about the next client, the next job. So yeah, that's definitely a trade-off. But you do have all sorts of freedom at the same time. So. We are just about out of time. I'm not exactly sure how these Zoom webinars wrap up, whether it hits 11 o'clock and like it just turns off or something. So before our time runs out, in case that's the situation, I just want to thank all three of you for coming and participating. It's great to see you all again. I hope that we can have you back in the future. And it's super helpful, great information. I really appreciate it. And yeah, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much.
Right. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
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 Bye.